Honestly, Ava, do you really have to wear those shoes to dinner? You look exhausted. It's Thanksgiving, not a double shift. The hook was delivered by my sister Cassandra, with a theatrical sigh that drew immediate attention from the entryway. She gestured dismissively at my sensible black non-slip clogs, the professional footwear of the service industry. The implication was clear. I was still defined by the low-status, physically draining work I performed to survive. My name is Ava Sterling. I am 32 years old, and for the last 10 years, I had worked in every position imaginable within the hospitality sector. Busser, bartender, line cook, and primarily high-end waiter. To my family, this was a collective decade-long failure. To me, it was a rigorous, unpaid MBA in the entire restaurant ecosystem. Cassandra, 35, was the golden child. She was a marketing executive, married to a corporate lawyer, and lived in a pristine condo near the city's financial district. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor Sterling, were pillars of the suburban legal community and viewed any job that involved wearing an apron or carrying a tray as a fundamental social and professional failure. The background conflict was simple. I had chosen passion over prestige. When I told my family I was dropping out of my pre-law program to move to New York and pursue restaurant work, my father declared me financially disinherited. "You're trading a future for crumbs, Ava. You'll spend your life taking orders, not giving them," he'd thundered. They provided financial backing for Cassandra's every venture, viewing her stable, predictable career as a reflection of their own success. My life, filled with unpredictable hours, scraped-together savings, and the constant smell of garlic and floor cleaner, was a source of endless, passive shame. The current event trigger was the annual family Christmas gathering, a mandatory attendance event designed to show off Cassandra's newest acquisition, this year, a diamond tennis bracelet, and remind me of my subordinate status. The humiliation scene began immediately at the dinner table. We were seated at the finest private dining room in their local country club, a setting meant to underscore their elevated social standing. "Speaking of service," my mother, Eleanor, began, looking at me with pity as she carved the turkey. "Ava, I know your hours are difficult, but seriously, have you considered finding something more client-facing? Something where you use your mind? Cassandra's firm is always hiring administrative assistants." Cassandra laughed, a high, sharp sound. "Mom, please. Ava is too valuable where she is. Who else is going to keep those tables wiped? Besides, she needs the cash tips, right, Ava? How else do you pay that ridiculous city rent?" "I manage," I replied, forcing my expression to remain blank. "We just worry about your future," my father Arthur interjected, his voice heavy with disappointed authority. "At your age, you should be building equity, retirement, stability, not running around with a pad and pencil. What happens when the tips dry up, Ava? What's the exit strategy from waiting tables?" The exit strategy question was their favorite weapon. They believed I had none, but they had no idea. The proof of worth was concealed in the thousands of hours I had spent not just waiting tables, but covertly managing every aspect of the various high-end establishments I worked in. I had learned menu costing, supplier negotiation, labor law compliance, and high-stakes customer relationship management. For the past 3 years, I had been working exclusively at a Michelin-starred establishment in the city, rising from server to assistant general manager, a role Michael had no knowledge of. For the last 18 months, I had been executing my own exit strategy, secretly developing the Sterling table, a concept that combined my deep knowledge of classical French cuisine with my innovative business model for high-efficiency, personalized service. The final element of the reversal had been set in motion 3 weeks ago. I had acquired the lease for a spectacular vacant space in the city's newly revitalized historic district. The renovation was complete. The staffing was finalized. The opening was imminent. The climax of the humiliation occurred when Cassandra pulled out a small velvet box. "Oh, before dinner is completely ruined by talk of shift schedules," she announced to the table. "Richard and I wanted to give Mom and Dad a small early gift." Inside the box was an embossed gift certificate. "It's a dinner reservation," Cassandra beamed, "for New Year's Eve, at the most exclusive new restaurant opening in the city, Lumiere. It's impossible to get into, but Richard pulled strings. They say the chef is revolutionary. It's the kind of place where people matter, Mom." Arthur and Eleanor were ecstatic, praising Cassandra for her thoughtfulness and resourcefulness. The implication was stark. I, the actual food industry professional, could only access the back door, while Cassandra accessed the exclusive front door. I looked at the gift certificate, suppressing a sudden, fierce smile. The beautiful, heavy paper stock. The elaborate, stylized logo. "Lumière," I murmured. "That is a beautiful logo, Cassandra. Very elegant." "It is," Cassandra said, settling back smugly. "It opens on December 28th. We are so excited to see what real ambition looks like." "I am sure you will," I replied, standing up abruptly. "If you will all excuse me, I need a moment." I left the private dining room, walked directly to the country club's payphone, an anachronism I knew was still there, and pulled out my personal phone. I sent a single text to my lead manager, Daniel. "The reservation is confirmed. They have the 8 p.m. New Year's Eve slot. Execute Phase 3, the final switch." My quiet work was about to intersect with their luxurious lives. The intervening weeks were a blur of frantic, high-stakes operational setup. I didn't see my family again until New Year's Eve, managing all communication through curt, polite text messages. They, meanwhile, were consumed with their excitement over Lumière, unaware of the seismic shift occurring beneath their feet. Lumière was, in fact, my restaurant. 3 weeks prior, I had been forced to rebrand my original concept, the Sterling Table, after discovering that Cassandra's marketing firm had attempted to trademark the name, claiming I had abandoned it. This was Cassandra's petty attempt to sabotage my future, based on her access to trade name databases. Instead of fighting, I embraced the change. I bought out the lease of an existing, faltering French bistro that occupied the space I desired and secured its highly valuable liquor license. I brought in an old friend, Chef Thierry, a culinary genius, to lead the kitchen. We rebranded the concept as Lumière, focusing on classical technique and hyper-modern presentation. The impossible-to-get reservations Cassandra had secured were, in fact, the first reservations ever booked, released by me to test the booking system. Reservations only her husband's assistant, using his specific network, could have found. New Year's Eve arrived, the night of the revelation. I spent the day in my own tiny studio apartment preparing, not just mentally but physically. I bypassed my usual waitress uniform and instead put on the tailored black suit that was the uniform of my general manager role. I checked my appearance, composed, professional, utterly unrecognizable from the exhausted, apron-clad sister they remembered. I arrived at Lumière at 7 p.m. The restaurant was stunning. It was sleek, intimate, and lit with a warm, inviting glow that made the glass facade seem like a portal into a hidden world. The energy was electric, buzzing with the excitement of the city's elite eager to try the new, exclusive establishment. At 7:45 p.m., I stood behind the bespoke hostess stand, reviewing the final reservations. There it was. Sterling, Arthur, party of 4, 8 Tower p.m. At 7:55 p.m., I saw them, my family. Arthur, Eleanor, Cassandra, and Richard stepped out of a hired black car. They looked immaculate, dressed in their finest formal wear, radiating the self-satisfied glow of people who believed they belonged precisely where they were. They approached the hostess stand. The head maitre d', Jean-Pierre, stepped forward. "Welcome to Lumière." Jean-Pierre greeted them in impeccable French-accented English. "Reservation, please?" "Sterling, Arthur," Dad announced, puffing out his chest slightly, proud of the exclusivity his son-in-law had secured. "We have the 8 o'clock reservation." Jean-Pierre checked his list, nodding. "Ah, oui. Monsieur Sterling, we have been expecting you. If you will allow me just a moment." He turned to me, his eyes deferential and professional. "Madame Sterling, your table is ready." My father paused, confused. He looked at Jean-Pierre, then back at Cassandra, assuming the maitre d' was referring to her. "No, that's Mrs. Sterling," Dad corrected impatiently, pointing at Cassandra. "I'm Mr. Sterling, and this is my wife, Eleanor. The reservation is under my name." Jean-Pierre offered a thin Gallic smile. "Forgive me, monsieur, but my instruction is to confirm the seating with Madame Sterling, the proprietor. She is awaiting your party." He gestured toward me. The family slowly turned toward me, standing behind the hostess stand, holding a clipped leather binder, my expression calm and unreadable. Cassandra was the first to speak, her voice a mixture of shock and immediate furious denial. "Ava, what are you doing in that uniform? Did you finally get a promotion? Are you the manager here?" "I am," I confirmed, closing the binder. "I am the general manager, and the owner." The revelation hit them with the force of a physical blow. Arthur's jaw dropped. Eleanor's hand flew to her pearls. Cassandra's face drained of color, realizing the colossal mistake she had made. The owner? Dad stammered, the confidence stripped from his voice. Lumière, but Cassandra said this was exclusive, that the chef was revolutionary. He is, I agreed. Chef Thierry is in the kitchen.
But the concept, the service model, the financial structure, and the equity, that is all mine.
I purchased the lease, the license, and the concept 18 months ago. Cassandra, thank you for securing your impossible reservation. I personally held it for you. Cassandra looked at the gift certificate in her husband's hand, then back at me. But this is impossible. You wait tables? You're broke. I waited tables to learn every single failure point in this industry, I countered, leaning slightly over the desk, my voice a quiet command. I learned the margin of every pour, the cost of every mistake, the secret to supplier negotiation, and the exact moment a customer feels neglected. While you were bragging about your promotions, I was receiving an education worth millions. I didn't have an exit strategy from waiting tables, Cassandra. Waiting tables was the strategy. Arthur, recovering slightly, tried a familiar tactical retreat. This is absurd, Ava. You're trying to humiliate us. You can't run a 5-star restaurant. Where did you get the capital? Who funded this? I funded the initial concept with the $500,000 I made selling my share in the last restaurant group I worked for. Money you dismissed as crumbs, I explained. And the rest? That came from Kalina Nova, an investment group that recognized that my dead-end job had given me the single most valuable asset in this industry. Comprehensive, hands-on operational knowledge. I looked at Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre, please show the Sterling party to their table. Jean-Pierre smiled broadly. Bien sûr, Madame Sterling. Right this way. As Jean-Pierre led them deeper into the shimmering dining room, I picked up a small, elegant menu and followed them. The entire restaurant, filled with the city's most influential patrons, watched the spectacle. The turning of tables was complete when I approached their table with a professional starched napkin draped over my arm. Their table was perfectly positioned, centrally located beneath the most dramatic chandelier, the maximum exposure location. Welcome, I said, addressing them formally. I will be your server tonight, Cassandra gasped. You're waiting on us? Is this some kind of sick joke, Ava? No joke, Cassandra, I replied, my expression perfectly polite. At Lumière, the owner serves the most important guests personally. I wanted to ensure your experience was flawless. Now can I take your coat, Mr. Sterling? My father, Arthur, slowly, stiffly relinquished his heavy wool coat. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was seeing the non-slip shoes, the crisp apron, the order pad, all the symbols he had mocked, now deployed by his own daughter, who also held the deed to the building and the control over his entire evening. I don't think I can eat, Eleanor whispered, her hand clutching her chest. Nonsense, Mother, I countered. The foie gras torchon is exquisite tonight. Our chef is truly revolutionary. I highly recommend the truffle ravioli. I designed the margin on that dish myself. I watched them squirm as I performed the ritual they had mocked. I described the wine list with intimate knowledge, explaining the subtle notes of a vintage they could barely afford. I took their orders with crisp, confident efficiency. When Cassandra ordered the most expensive steak, attempting to exert some semblance of financial control, I simply nodded. Excellent choice, Cassandra. That cut comes from a supplier in Quebec. I negotiated their contract personally last month. The quality is unmatched. The small table conversation was excruciatingly minimal, their shame amplified by the constant silent flow of prestigious guests being led past their table. The climax arrived when the food was served. Chef Thierry sent out a beautiful amuse-bouche platter, a gift from the kitchen. As I placed the tiny, perfect plates before them, Cassandra finally broke. Enough, Ava. This is torture! We get it. You won. You're rich. You own a restaurant. Stop acting like a servant. The sudden outburst drew the attention of the nearest tables. I leaned down, keeping my voice low and dangerously calm. I am not acting like a servant, Cassandra. I am demonstrating the precise level of dedication and hard work you mocked for 10 years. You considered this work a dead end, I whispered, gesturing at my spotless apron. But this apron is my shield and this order pad is my ledger. While you were focused on titles and status, I was gathering the ground-level data necessary to build an empire. You thought I was beneath you. I was simply gaining altitude. Arthur looked at me, defeat etched across his features. "What do you want, Ava? What is the price of this humiliation?" "The price," I stated, standing straight, "is recognition. The price is respect. And the price is that you acknowledge that your definition of success, stability, predictability, lack of manual labor, is fundamentally flawed." I handed them the final crushing blow. "Now I must ask you to leave. Your outburst is disrupting my other patrons." Cassandra was stunned. "You're kicking us out? On New Year's Eve? But we have the impossible reservation." "The reservation is rescinded," I said, nodding to Jean-Pierre, who immediately approached the table with quiet authority. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Jean-Pierre will escort you to the door." As they were escorted out, the picture of public shame, I felt the ultimate release. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply forced them to confront the devastating consequence of their own cruelty, framed by the very work they scorned. The long-term consequences were a calculated, quiet restructuring of the Sterling family's entire value system. The public and professional fallout. The story of the humiliating New Year's Eve service spread like wildfire through the city's exclusive circles. People weren't just talking about the excellent food at Lumiere. They were talking about the dramatic ownership reveal. Arthur Sterling's reputation, built on conservative, reliable judgment, suffered immensely. His peers now saw him as a man whose arrogance prevented him from recognizing his own daughter's genius, nearly leading her into bankruptcy. Lumiere became an immediate, spectacular success. Its exclusivity wasn't manufactured. It was earned through impeccable service and revolutionary cuisine. I opened a second location within 2 years, and the original, derided, dead-end job became the foundation of a multi-million-dollar hospitality group. Arthur and Eleanor's reckoning. My parents, stripped of their social influence, tried desperately to reconcile. Their calls were no longer condescending. They were pathetic pleas for validation. "Elara, darling, we are so proud of you. We always knew you had this in you," Eleanor gushed during a strained phone call 6 months later. "You knew I was good with colors and digital things, Mother," I corrected her gently. "You never knew I could run a business. You never believed I could." My father's attempts were more pragmatic. He offered me business advice on expansion, advice I politely but firmly declined, knowing his traditional wisdom was obsolete in my hyper-efficient model. Arthur eventually bought a stake in one of my suppliers, a small organic farm I relied on, not as an investment, but as a plea for proximity and relevance. I accepted the terms, forcing him to be a silent, distant partner in the supply chain I controlled. He was now literally serving my success from the lowest rung of the business. Cassandra's downfall. Cassandra suffered the most acute consequence. Her marriage to Richard began to crumble under the weight of her social shame and his financial disappointment. When Richard's firm faced a major lawsuit, I received a phone call from Cassandra, 3 years after the initial confrontation. "Ava," she whispered, her voice raw, "Richard's firm needs a major event catered. A huge, exclusive legal summit. They need impeccable service, perfect food. It has to be the best. I told them Lumiere is the only place. Please, you have to do this for us. It could save Richard's career." I paused. "Cassandra, I appreciate the interest, but Lumiere no longer handles outside catering. Our focus is on our in-house patrons. But you can't say no. This is family. I'm begging you. You're the only one who can pull this off." "You're right, Cassandra," I said, the finality ringing in my voice. "I'm the only one who can pull this off. But I am not doing it for Richard. I am not doing it for your firm. I am doing it for the memory of the young woman you mocked for a decade." I paused, delivering the final crushing blow. "I will manage the event. I will use the revenues to fund my 3rd restaurant location. But your entire family must be explicitly excluded from attending the summit. I want every decision, every menu choice, every service detail, approved by me, and then executed without your presence or input. Your only role will be to stand on the periphery, watch the success, and be grateful for the crumbs of my generosity." Cassandra wept, but she agreed. She had no choice. The final act of justice occurred 5 years after the initial humiliation. I stood in my office, looking down at the city I now dominated. Lumiere was an international brand. I was preparing to launch a new, accessible line of products that would reach markets far beyond the elite diners of New York. My father, Arthur, now 75, walked into my office. He was frail, humble, and carried a copy of my memoir, the counter strategy, which had just hit the bestseller list. "Alara," he began, his voice barely audible, "I read your book. The section about the Christmas dinners, the apron, the exit strategy comments. I was a terrible father to you. I was wrong. Completely wrong. I am truly proud of you." "Your pride is appreciated, Dad," I replied, standing to embrace him, the anger long since replaced by a cold, quiet peace. But my worth was never reliant on it. The moment I placed that menu in your hand, I was no longer seeking your approval. I was simply executing my business plan. He looked at me, a profound sadness in his eyes. "What was the hardest part of waiting tables?" "The hardest part," I said, looking past him at the sprawling city, "was keeping the rage quiet, keeping the ambition hidden, and watching the people I loved laugh at my dedication. But that mockery was my fuel. It gave me the intimate, painful knowledge I needed to create a system they could never touch." He nodded, a gesture of final defeat. He finally understood that the most powerful form of capital wasn't the money he had managed, but the operational knowledge I had gained while wearing the apron. The moral closure was achieved completely. My family had mocked my dead-end job, believing that serving others was a symbol of failure. I had used that very job to gain the mastery necessary to own and operate the ultimate symbols of culinary prestige. I hadn't just served them dinner. I had served them the final perfect dish of consequences, plated entirely on my own terms. The mockery had ceased, and the ultimate victory was the realization that their old, privileged reality was now merely a table in my restaurant. I had won the game by standing at the entrance and holding the seating chart.